Hello everyone, and I hope you're all doing very well. So the question has been asked from you guys, hello Cap, how do you dodge Aim-54 Phoenixes? A lot of people are getting shot down by Phoenixes and simply because they're not dodging them correctly. Or evading them, I guess should be the proper word. So this is quite a complex issue because it's a complex missile. The Aim-54 Phoenix, as we all know, is a Fox 3 capable missile. And it can be fired in 5 different modes, and those 5 different modes require different types of evasion. But what we're going to do today is look at worst case scenario. And then as long as you apply the rules that we're looking at today to any of the other methods that the missile can fire at you, then you will be covered. So the worst case scenario is that it's fired in full Fox 3 config, i.e. the Tomcat firing it is firing in a TWS mode, which means we won't get any warning on that missile's being fired. The soonest we'll get a warning on our RWR in our aircraft is when the missile goes pitbull, when it turns its own radar tracker on and severs the link to its mothership. Now it's very dangerous in a Phoenix because that happens at about 5 to 6 miles from our aircraft, and if fired correctly, that missile can still be doing over 2,000 knots, nearly hypersonic. Very difficult to beat kinetically. So in this test, we're going to look at the worst case scenario. We're going to say that the Aim-54 is fired at us at relatively close range. And in fact, before we go any further, let's talk about ranges. We can split this into 2, close range and long range. Now, close range is going to be classified as at which point the missile is going to be impacting you or getting to you, and it's still in its solid rocket motor burn phase. So that would be a distance of 8 miles to 15 miles, depending on altitude. So about 8 miles, maybe a little bit less on the deck, about 15 miles up to about 20,000 feet in terms of our evading aircraft, which is as high as we're going to look. Now, for that close type of evasion, I'm not going to go through that today because I've already done a comprehensive video on it, looking at dodging Fox 3 missiles when they're still in rocket burn, and so I'm going to link that as the first link in the video description, so please go and look at that for close range missiles, and it obviously applies to the Phoenix as well. So today instead we're just looking at long range, which is anything above 8 to 15 miles at those relevant altitudes. And it means basically that when a rocket is impacting us or getting to us, it's no longer in rocket fuel burn, it's now a glider. And the difference between defeating or evading a gliding missile to a still burning missile is night and day. So back to this video, like I said, we're going to have our worst case scenario. The Hostile 14 is going to be firing in TWS mode. This means that we can't detect the missile has been fired until it goes pitbull, which is very close to us, which means we've got just a few seconds before we blow up. And that's probably the thing that's been frustrating most of you guys out there. So our Hostile is going to fire at about 35 miles, which I'd consider about realistic and optimal for the F-14. Generally, the F-14, 95% of missiles, or maybe even more, we see fired by F-14s in actual missions are fired between 30 and 50 miles. More than 50 miles, they're just not really effective. Below 30 miles, then the F-14 becomes vulnerable to AMRAAMs and stuff like that. And the whole idea of the Phoenix is that you don't have to make yourself vulnerable to AMRAAMs. So we're going to put it at 35 miles to make an average, realistic missile fired upon us in this scenario. We're also going to use the Mark 60A variant, which I'll consider the worst. It's much faster than the other 2 variants. I've done a full video comparing the different stats, and it has up to 600 knots more impact speed at this range, and that makes it much more difficult to dodge. So this missile could be doing over 2,000 knots of impact, whereas a Mark 47 motor missile will typically be doing about 1,400 knots. So that's 600 more knots of mechanical energy on that missile we've got to scrub off and dodge. And the way we're going to do it is almost the same move, whether at high altitude or whether at low altitude. And we're going to do this test at high altitude, Angels 20, just because that's a typical high altitude place for us to travel, and low altitude, basically as low as we can get. And the way we're going to do the evasion is as soon as we get the pitbull sign, we're going to go into a left or right diving notch. Now, there may be a proper fighter pilot term for this. I don't know what it is. I call it a diving notch because, well, that's what it is at the end of the day. So the first thing we do is we need to get speed in our energy, mechanical energy in our aircraft. So as soon as we get that warning, we invert, and you can roll left or right to invert. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. Then aft stick to start transferring potential energy into kinetic to maximize our mechanical energy, airspeed, and G. We want to maximize, if possible, or optimize our G and our airspeed, keep them as high as possible within reason. As soon as we're down to plumb in the vertical or near plumb, then we are going to roll out either left or right from our original direction. And we're assuming, by the way, that the missile is coming from ahead. But I think, to be honest, this even works if the missile is being fired behind us. So just don't worry too much about the direction of the missile. It's very unlikely that the missile will come from the side, because it would be very difficult for the Tomcat to get a lock on this to fire like that. So we're going plumb. Like I said, now we either turn, roll left or right. And what we're going to do is go into a sideways notch, i.e. fly perpendicular to the hostile, either left or right. Whether you choose left or right is tactical. If there's a bunch of SAMs over the left, turn right. If there's another hostile fighter to the right, then turn left. It's something you'll be thinking about generally while you're flying. It's part of your situational awareness. Once we've transferred down to about 10,000 feet at maximum speed, then we will be pulling out at high G again, up to 9G not exceeding, and leveling out and travelling along a beam to the hostile, notching him. And this is the thing that's going to kill the missile. It's going to force either kinetically, it simply can't turn to keep up with this, or more likely it'll fool its radar. Now, we're never quite sure when the missile has been beaten, because the RWR warning could go cold in our aircraft, and that could mean that the missile has been beaten. But it's possible that that missile, if it's coming down quite steep, which they do sometimes, and we're now travelling flat, that could be in our dead zone of our RWR. So what I'd say is just to make sure, travel a beam for a good few seconds, a good 5 or 6 seconds, just to make sure that missile's been beaten before we turn back in or out. Now that comes to the last part of the manoeuvre. At the end of the notch, end of the beam, after 5 or 6 seconds, we're going to roll and turn left back into combat, or roll and turn right back out of combat. All this time is max power, by the way, if I haven't said sorry. Everything's got to be at maximum. And again, that's due to your tactical situational awareness. You know, if you want to go and assault the guy in, or if you want to retreat for tactical reasons, then turn away. All the time we're going to be chaffing. Don't be too conservative with the chaff. It will help dodge the missile. That's it. That's how to do it at high altitude, and we'll show all this. I'll show all this in TAC view and whatnot in a minute. But the next way is if we were low, so we don't have that vertical space to play with, we're going to do the nearest version we can to a diving notch that we can. So we're going to wait for the beeper to go on the RWR, and then we're going to roll over. We won't be able to roll over fully, but just roll over 110, 120, 130 degrees, whatever we can get, back stick, and pull into a notch, a beam again, as quickly as you can, as fast as you can, high G as you can, and the resulting notch beam wants to be as close to the ground as possible. So you want to get down to 50 feet if you can, to absolutely make sure that radar cannot track you when you're flying in the notch, when you're flying in the beam, i.e. perpendicular to the travel of where you were, sorry. And once you're down in that notch, then the missile simply won't have the ability to see you against the ground. It'll most likely just explode itself or give up and run into the ground. The higher you are, the harder it is to dodge a Phoenix. A Phoenix is any rocket-fueled missile, whether it's gliding or whether it's still powered, is much more effective higher up. And our aircraft is much less effective because we have air-breathing engines and it doesn't. The lower down we are, the tables turn. The much better the jet airplane is, the worse the missile is due to drag, and the much better we can maneuver. So we'll probably see it is much easier to do this dodging low down. The biggest worry that you guys probably know this already, the biggest thing to think about here, A, reaction time. You've got to get on it straight away. B, you've got to maximize it. Really make the pull, really get those burners on. Nothing else will do. And C, the biggest killer in this move is not getting hit by a Phoenix, because if you do it right, you will never get hit by a Phoenix. It's yourself, it's crashing into the ground and or over G'ing. So it's G discipline, aft stick discipline, which is the third thing to think about. So we'll go and do it now. We'll fight, use just an F5, I imagine, because why not? It's not particularly fast. It is fairly good maneuvering, and I'll turn its radar off. Not that we would be able to see the F-14 anyway. One quick caveat, I've just thought some of those missiles are smoked from the Tomcat, and in some few cases that might help. If it's just, a one-on-one, you versus a Tomcat, you might be able to see that smoke missile. Usually in a tactical situation it doesn't help. Usually you've got many guys on your side, many guys on the bad guy's side, so even if you see the smoke trail of the missile, you've got no idea if it's going for you or the bad guys until the pitbull warning. Okay, so let's do our first test. I am in the F5, I'm going to be Angels 20, Onslaught is in the Tomcat, he's going to be at whatever Angels he wants to be. He's going to make it as best he can to do a kill shot, so he'll be high and fast to get as much energy as he can. Right, so I'm going to plod along, Angels 20 ASL at cruise speed. I'm not ready for this missile at all, I'm just cruising along. Got my chaff set up, hopefully. Yes, I have. So I've got no idea. You can see I've got no idea that there is a guy out there. So as soon as he fires and I get the pitbull warning, I'm going to invert. I'm going to head straight down. I'm going to turn left or right to notch the missile, either left or right, max speed, max burn, max G. And when I've considered the missile beaten, which is going to be very difficult, then I'm going to engage or disengage as I see fit.
35 miles firing.
He's firing now. It's, like we said earlier, it's in TWS mode, so we won't get any kind of warning on here. We won't get any warning until the missile is 5 miles away, which it goes pitbull, at which point it's at the verge of being too late. We have to react very quickly, and we're going to be doing chaff throughout this as well, for what it's worth. We can actually tally the missile, and that is a valid way of looking out for these missiles, but in reality you might have 20 guards on our side and 20 hostiles. You never know that's going to be for you. So, in reality it's not something you would actually use, generally speaking. There's the missile, ramp up the G, put out the chaff, get vertical, turn left.
Oh, you notched it.
Into the
nice.
notch. Lovely, that's it. At this point, I'm not happy I'm beating the missile yet. I'm just going to make sure, okay, I'm now happy I've beaten the missile. I can now turn in to engage or away to evade. He's fired at, what, 35 miles, which I'd say is roughly optimal in a typical BVR fight when I could be a flanker or an F-14 or an F-15. It gives him plenty of margin for safety. And he's got the, like we said earlier, he's got the Mark 60 variant, which is the most powerful one kinetically, hardest to dodge. And it's going to go pitbull at 5 to 6 miles, I usually say. As soon as I start rolling, that's when it's gone pitbull at 6 miles in this case. And it's massively high in mechanical energy, over 2,000 knots already, which is about as bad as it gets. Well, yeah, literally is as bad as it gets. So we've got to work very hard to beat this guy. So we're going to just turn that down now. So first we're going to roll over. And as we said before, the direction we roll is going to depend tactically what's out there on the battlefield. And you can see I'm, 450 indicated, 630 TAS. 630 TAS. Over. I go. Back aft stick, G. I'm going to limit to around 6 to 7, I imagine. And you can see all those chaffs going out, just to make sure. Yeah, just over, got over 7G there, 7.5G. So we could afford to push it a bit more. I'm just not used to this plane and the G tolerances of it. So let's just check that out again from another view. You can see that missile trying to track me there. And we're into the notch pretty much now. And it just can't do it. It just can't get that angle. It just can't track me. Now, I've never quite been sure whether it can't track me kinetically in terms of it just can't turn enough. I don't think it's that. I think it's got plenty of turn authority in it. What I've always thought is that it simply loses track because look how far off bore sight it has to slew its radar, nearly 90 degrees, to see me. So my understanding is that it actually just loses track because I'm forcing it to track me so far off bore sight. It could, of course, I could be wrong, and it could be the fact that it just cannot maneuver kinetically, but that's my understanding. So it can no longer track me, and it's now a dead missile. You know, a couple of microseconds or a couple of milliseconds without being to track me, and it will be off course. It won't be able to recover itself, and that's a dead missile. So that's how we've done that. Okay, because we've got a bit of time, just one more look at the maneuver. Pitbull, invert, aft stick, and you really got to control that aft stick, not too much, because you can either A, burn off too much speed, B, ramp up, and that would slow you down, and or ramp up too much G. You want to ramp on the G gradually, like we're doing here. Good control of the aft stick. Make the turn once we're almost vertical, and that's it. You're forcing the missile out of parameters, and that's a dead missile at that point, and it will beat them all day long. And at this point, I could have turned straight in and reattacked, but I'd like to make sure, because I didn't really know where that missile was. It could have had a different aspect. It could have come, you know, right down on top of me. So I really want to make sure it's beaten. Give it a few seconds. It's always best to be, you know, extra safe, and then recommit or turn away depending on what my tactical situation is. In this case, I'm going to turn in and try and dogfight him. Okay, second test. We're on the deck this time. I'll be about 1,000 feet because I want to make sure his radar can pick me up okay and hit me. I'm going to go to 450 knots again, get my chaff set up again. No, in theory it should be a little easy down here because that missile having to come down so low is going to burn a lot of his kinetic energy off. It's going to give me and my aircraft is a lot faster down here. That said, it's much harder for me to gain mechanical energy down here because I can't use gravity. So that kind of cancels that effect out. So the best thing I'm going to do is when I get into the notch, I'm going to keep as low as I possibly can. It just makes it harder for that seeker head to find me. Right, can you find me okay, Onslaught? About 2,000 feet.
Radar tracking.
Okay, send when ready. Sorry, send optimal.
Lost radar, lost track.
Did you fire it?
Nope.
Roger, see if it comes back. It's not a particularly good look down radar, this.
Yeah, it's not really a...
Okay, we're going in for another go. This time I'm going to go 3,000 ASL, 2,000 AGL. It's not as low as I wanted it to, but it's just a limitation of the Tomcat radar, at least in that mode that we want to use him in. A bit annoying, but...
Alright, missile out.
Oh, right, we got it. Finally. Okay, there it is. Right, so we can see it there, but you know, like I said in the previous test, I'm not going to use that cue because there could be 20 other F5s out here that missile's going for. I can't just dodge it on the hope or the thought it might be for me. So we're going to wait until we get a pit bull. It's always a bit worrying. I mean, you can kind of see it. I can see it heading straight for me. It's one of the most worrying sights you're going to face. It's going to go pitbull soon. There we go. Out go chaffs. Into our notching dive. Careful not to over G. Low as we can. Low as we dare. Plenty of chaffs out. Make sure we've dodged. I think we have. And we can recommit or run away. This time we're going to run away. And there we go. Simple as that. So that will beat a Phoenix every single time pretty much. And your only worry there is not G'ing out basically in an F-15 or a flanker or whatever. The gravity is going to be the worst threat there. Okay, thank you very much, Onslaught. Okay, and we had some trouble doing the low one simply because we couldn't get the Tomcat to track us, but we're going to see if we can find the file that worked. Okay, so he's fired low. I didn't realise he was going down low this time, but I guess it's for whatever reason that's just helping him lock me up, so he did what he had to do basically. He's fired the missile, and it goes. I'm going to get that there. Now, like we said, it's not going to be as hard kinetically because this missile flying down in the thick, low air, it simply can't retain its mechanical energy. So it's 1,200 knots, but still 1,200 knots is not something to be snooted at. So I'm at my 500 TAS, thereabouts. I'm about to get my warning. I've probably already got it now. You know, it's about 5 to 6 miles. We've calculated the variance of this missile. We'll go pitbull. In fact, that one waited until just under 5 miles, so that was a real sod. I'm not sure if it was based on speed or what, the pitbull time. And I really had to slam that round straight into 9G there. Now it's much easier to pull high G fast down here because obviously thicker air, the wings, the elevons, everything, the elevators, sorry, everything just works a lot better, and the engines. So I've slung that down into our notch, and it looks like I'm going to beat it a lot easier than I thought I would have. Onto the ground, and we're simply going to beat this, if you like, kinetically or maybe geometrically, but will be a better word here, because for that to theoretically intercept us, it's got to fly essentially through the ground. And to be honest, it looked like it just given up at that point anyway. So what I suspect had happened was massively tight turn, you see, and if we can optimize up to 9G, then that's great. You're just going to be careful down here. Very easy to over G because, like I said, our surfaces can work so good down here. It's very easy to over G, and obviously down at this altitude, it's a death sentence. So you really need to just watch out for that. And to be honest, it looks like the missile was already dead then. When I'd come into the notch, oh no, maybe it's following me still. There, it seemed dead there. It started turning and started tracking me, but by this point, due to whatever due to the fact that I'm side on, I'm notching him, and I'm low, that missile there just can't see me. Either that or it can't compute itself to hit me anymore, but I think probably most realistically it simply can't see me to track anymore because of my aspect and my altitude. And so that is just simply a dead missile now. Again, not going to take any chances, lots of countermeasures out, and missile decided to go through the ground, which is interesting. So give it a few seconds again before we go anywhere on max burn, and then this time tactically I've decided to turn away. Right, that's it. So those are the two moves that I would recommend in any situation while fighting what we believe is a Aim-54 Phoenix of any of the three varieties. If done correctly and at full bore, then it should save you every time. In just about any plane, I'll try this in an A10 or something at some point and see if we can do it in an A10. I bet you probably could, just because you turn so quickly and upset that missile. I hope that was useful otherwise, and I'll see you later.